Federal Reserve raised interest rates by another 3/4 of a percentage point as it continues to discipline labor. Chair Jerome Powell is putting people out of work and sinking the economy into a recession to fight inflation caused by supply chain issues, corporate consolidation, and profit seeking. So far, no indication that inflation is dropping, but it does look like we're headed toward a recession. The IMF this week lowered its economic forecasts and predicted major slowdowns in the global economy. The White House and Jerome Powell continue to insist that the U.S. is not on the verge of a recession by pointing to the strength of the labor market and job creation. But that's a bit paradoxical since the Fed's actions are geared precisely toward weakening that labor market. Here's Chair Powell explaining that we're not in a recession yet, but it's getting harder to avoid one.
All I've really said is I don't think it's likely that the U.S. economy is in a recession now, and I've explained why that is the case. It's because you do see a very strong labor market, and I think the public will see that as well. You know, going forward, what we've seen is a slowing in spending, as I mentioned. We've seen the very beginnings of perhaps a slight lessening in the tightness of the labor market, but it would only be the beginnings. So, and I mentioned that I also said that our goal is to bring inflation down and have a so-called soft landing, by which I mean a landing that doesn't require a significant increase, a really significant increase in unemployment. We're trying to achieve that. I've said on many occasions that we understand that's going to be quite challenging and that it's gotten more challenging over recent months.
In other words, if the Fed is successful in reducing job creation and wage growth, then it won't be able to point to the strength of the labor market to deny we're in a recession. We'll just be in a recession. Meanwhile, a separate front has been opened up in the class war against workers. Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar introduced legislation this week that is downright awful for working people. He's calling it the Workplace Flexibility and Choice Act, a title that must refer to capitalists having the flexibility and choice to not pay you a fair wage. The bill would subject workers to so-called flexibility agreements offered by employers. It's not just gig companies, but any company that can offer them as a condition of employment. If a worker accepts it, then they are no longer protected by the Fair Labor Standards Act, meaning a boss no longer has to pay them minimum wage or provide overtime compensation or respect their organizing rights. It truly is as bad as it sounds. Cuellar co-sponsored the bill with the third most powerful Republican in the House, Elise Stefanik. You know, some were confused by Democratic leadership's decision to support Henry Cuellar in a contested primary back in June. His positions on guns and abortion made him particularly toxic to the mainstream of the party. He's got an A grade from the NRA, not something to boast about after Uvalde, and he does not support a right to an abortion, something you think would be anathema to the party post-Dobbs. But Cuellar brings other assets to the table that are prized by today's Democratic Party leadership. Bills like this that signal to big business executives, particularly tech oligarchs, we're on your side. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. Also, if you want to see Means Morning News in its complete form, not just the clips we post here, head on over to Means TV and get access to all our new episodes and our entire backlog, plus tons of other great movies and original TV shows.